this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. I am bringing you all another member of the Compassionate Counseling team today. She is the newest addition to our leadership team, our clinical director, Kelly Geagan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I am so happy to be able to share you with our audience. You and this position ultimately were something that was a work in progress for a long time. It took a lot for us in the group practice to be in a position to bring somebody on in this capacity. So that in and of itself was a big deal. But then when we put the job post out there, to find the right person was an additional challenge. And you have far exceeded what I ever could have expected in this position. You've been such a welcomed addition to the team. We're going to talk obviously about that, but I would love for people to learn a little bit more about you and your background. So fill us in with whatever you're comfortable sharing about your career climb and what contributed to you landing in a position like this.
Sure. Well, it started when I was 21, and I started working in girls' juvenile detention. That was my first experience with human services. I really loved it. It was very unique work and different from what I had ever done. I became a supervisor within 6 months. I feel like leadership has just sort of been a part of me. I don't know if it's anything that I sought out as much as it finds me.
Yeah.
And then once I finished, I was there for a little while, and then I went to the boys detention center and started working for the state. That was also a very unique experience. But I loved it, and I did this very similar thing. So I went from being a floor worker to a shift supervisor to a shift administrator. And then once I got to where I wanted to be, I was like, all right, what's next? And I knew that I didn't want to stay in DYS. As much as it supported me, it was a great place to be. I learned a lot from there. But I wanted to expand my resume. I wanted more on my resume. So I started working for a collaborative school as a paraprofessional. I would have to say that was my favorite job. I loved being in a school setting. I loved working with middle school kids. It was really, really rewarding. And how did I get onto LMHC? Well, it was a program director that was like, you're really good at this. You should maybe look into that. And I was like, okay. And then I did. So I went back to school later in life, which I say worked for me because I had a lot of experience and I was ready to do school. So I went back to school. I finished my undergrad and then just went right into my master's program and for mental health counseling. And then I went back to DYS as a clinician. I didn't love it. It was great, but it wasn't what I wanted out of this work. And then I started working for Child and Family Services as a clinician. I had a lot of good experience there. And then I think after 4 years, I became the risk manager for the agency, doing investigations and yeah, kind of facilitating meetings around risk, stuff like that. I really, really enjoyed that position a lot.
Yeah.
It was very helpful, and I think being a therapist was helpful in that as well.
Hmm.
And then from there was a need for a program director's position for the adult crisis stabilization. And I went into that position. And that position was, it was a lot, but I learned a lot from it. It was very fast paced. It was, you had to always be on your toes. I met a lot of great people, clients and coworkers. It was great, but working in a crisis program, if you are, in my opinion, it is not sustainable. You have to have a certain mindset to stay there. And I am getting older and I want to ease into my old age, not always be, go, 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 go. So I ultimately left there, and I found compassionate counseling through a friend who highly recommended. And, everything that she said about compassionate counseling was right. It was scary making this transition. And even, you and I, right, I didn't start out saying, I want to be the clinical director. I was coming on board as
Right.
a clinician.
Yes.
So that's sort of the very quick way of how I got here from the beginning.
Mm. Yeah, so I'm thinking back and recalling that, and I'm glad you mentioned that because at this point, I can't see anybody else doing this. And it's so easy for me to just assume that that's what this was, and it wasn't. You're right. I remember the conversations that we had had about you coming on board as a clinician, and in meeting with you, it became very clear to me that you had a skill set that was so far beyond that you came in with experience already in those types of positions. And so this really morphed and evolved, which was so cool because it was new for us. We could really kind of co-create what worked the best for the practice. And yeah, it's interesting to think about how that all played out, and here we are. So I see this trend with you that you will kind of start in a position and then you kind of land in a leadership role. And so obviously those are skills that you possess inherently. And so I'm curious, for those listening, what would you say are those key traits or components that really contribute to somebody being successful in a leadership role?
Well, you have to be able to look at both sides of things. A little bit of like being diplomatic and, being able to entertain something that maybe you personally don't agree with, but you still have to be able to stretch your mind and see it from someone else's perspective. I think that's huge. I think you have to have the ability to remain calm under pressure, because if you're the leader, you have to let your people have faith in you, and not that you can't be human and still have a panic moment, but when you have other people counting on you, you have to kind of be that grounding person for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just being, recognizing, and as much as I hate admitting this, but that you're human, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that it's part of it. You have to allow grace for yourself,
Yeah.
and just know that you're going to make some mistakes. And as long as it's not done with like malice or anything like that, like it's just part of the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Never be too far from where you started that you can't either say sorry or, recognize that you still have lots of your own learning to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you can learn from anybody, right? And so I think that, to kind of wrap it up, is never stop learning if you want to be a leader, right? It's very, very important.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm just thinking of so many examples over the last few months where all of those have really shined through with you and the team. So I think it's important to just elaborate a little bit, because clinical director can mean very different roles and responsibilities depending on the practice, depending on what agency or what company. So for us, clinical director is kind of the next person underneath the practice owner. And so when we had created this position, it was a balance between carrying a caseload smaller than a full-time clinician while also managing some administrative and supervisory tasks. And so Kelly in our practice has taken on facilitating our peer supervision and peer consultation groups. So we have bi-weekly groups that run consistently, and she's taking notes and she's sending out those reminders. And she's also that sounding board for clinicians where we have a rotation of who presents. And obviously, everyone is coming together to support one another, share resources, guidance, how they would handle something, make recommendations. But then she's kind of there as the leadership person from the practice who is able to weigh in if there is some sort of a policy or an ethical consideration or, bigger picture item that needs to be brought to everyone's attention. And she's also taken over our dashboards. So we have a spreadsheet that we had created, and it is a way to track metrics in our practice. So it tracks documentation, so how timely clinicians are with the completion of all of their notes, assessments, treatment plans, outcome measures, and also rating the level of quality. So we have the opportunity to provide some commentary if there are, certain details that we need in certain sections. Then we track session numbers. So we have an agreement with clinicians when they first come on board, if they're part-time or full-time, and what we require as far as the number of clients seen every week. So we're tracking how many they're scheduling, how many clients are actually showing, and then the late cancellation and no-show rate, so that we can hopefully identify any issues early, address it, and making sure that clinicians are fulfilling those numbers. And then we also rate them on the culture of the practice and their attendance at the monthly team meetings that we have, those peer supervision and consultation meetings, supervision, and the additional things that we as a practice offer. So we're pretty involved in the community. We take part in some fundraising efforts, and we also have gatherings for team building. And then we have an administrative section. So we are fortunate to have our director of operations who does a great job. And we want to make sure she's being utilized appropriately, that she's being given the right information by each clinician to assign the right clients to them, and that they're timely in letting her know when they have a spot to fill in their schedule. And so we have timeframes that we operate within. And so if somebody's within their first 90 days, they have a dashboard completed every week to make sure that they're on track. And then they transition to monthly. And then once they have 3 consecutive dashboards with minimal issues, they transition to quarterly. And so that's the bulk of what I'm sure takes up a lot of Kelly's time, in addition to a caseload. And also being that physical presence in the office in a lot of those times where I, as the practice owner, am not. And she's been able to step in when there are situations that happen, if there is something on a crisis level, or if there's a clinician that needs some more support. And so that, I think, in summary, kind of covers the basics. But I would love to hear from you, Kelly, about what your acclimation to the practice has been like, what the development of this role has felt like from you, and anything else that would be helpful to anybody listening who might be a group practice owner who's considering hiring somebody for this role, or somebody who might be considering looking for a role like this.
Sure. So acclimating to this position, I will say it was a slow build. Mm-hmm. And as I reflect on it, I think that was so helpful for me, right? And it's probably the first time, I've ever taken any position in my whole working career that there was a slow buildup, mm-hmm. right? And so it was new to me, and I think there were parts of me that were like squirming and we got to get going, But I think it helped me get settled and really understand the components of this position. So in that sense, you knew better, right? And so I think reflecting on it, I appreciate it, because I could really see how it was helpful instead of just jumping in. And then mm-hmm. I think there's that saying baptism through fire. I don't want to learn hard lessons anymore. I would like to enjoy a position and ease into it. And I think that's exactly what happened. So I really appreciate that. The other clinicians here and the other leadership team and administrators, everybody's really great, and I don't say that just to say that. It's true, and people are very welcoming. They're very kind. Everybody comes with as their best self when they're coming to meetings, or anytime during peer supervision or peer consultation. Folks are always looking for ways to help, and it's not nobody's just sitting on the meeting, like trying to get over with the meeting. Everybody is invested. Everybody's ready to help. And I love that. And not to say that
Mhm.
hasn't shown up in other ways and in other jobs, but this one is just more concentrated. It
Yeah.
feels I don't know. I really feel like the message that compassionate counseling is trying to give is here. It's present.
Mm.
And I think clients could speak to that,
Yeah.
um, as far as, tell me the question again about
Well,
for
it's
other
kind of
practice
from that
owners.
perspective of someone maybe considering
Hmm.
hiring a clinical director but hesitating.
Sure.
What, if anything, could you share that might help them? And then from that perspective of somebody who might be intrigued by a position like this.
Sure, sure. So I would say if you're thinking about hiring a clinical director,
Mhm.
obviously I'm biased and think that you should. But I think, and obviously, you, Julia, could speak more to this, but I think it's about, lightening the load for the practice owner, right? And it's a skill set that I come in with that I'm happy to do. Like this is stuff that I love doing. Obviously, like I enjoy meeting with clients. That's sort of my trade. But this is what gets me excited.
Yeah.
So I think, if you're looking to diversify what you already have on your plate,
Hmm.
why not? Um, and if you do it in the same manner that Julia has done it, then there's no real risk, right? If you
Yeah.
integrate slowly, you can really see what that person's about, if
Hmm.
they're a good fit for the practice, everything, right? So it gives it the opportunity. It's like a probationary period, so to speak, right? And
Hmm.
so it makes sense. As far as someone becoming a clinical director, um, yeah, I mean, you only live once, right? Take the
Hmm.
shot. There's not much to lose as long as you know, like that you have the skill set. Obviously,
Sure.
if you've never done it before, um, it's I think it's a rewarding position, but when you are in a leadership position, you have to be able to. I don't know how to explain it, articulate it well. So it's like you have to learn professionally your boundaries, right? And they
Yeah.
become a little bit different. And where you were, if you're a clinician with other clinicians, you might be able to vent in certain ways, but that has to change when you get
Hmm.
into a leadership position.
Yeah.
So you can know the work, but if you aren't there professionally, it's that's something that you have to kind of learn along the way. But I say,
Absolutely.
go for it, strengthen your resume and get the experience. Who's going to allow that experience for you? And yeah.
You brought up two key things there that I would love to elaborate on. The
Sure.
first one is ensuring that the person is a good fit. And I can speak from my position where just thinking of those other practice owners out there who might find it challenging to start to delegate and outsource tasks, to bring on a leadership team. A lot of those thoughts that go through our heads of how's the team going to respond to this? Are they going to do things in the way that I do them? Are they going to uphold our standards? Do they share our mission and values? And I now can be in this position and say that if those things are all really important to you, and if you have embodied that, and if your team also is aligned with that, and you're communicating it and it comes across in your website and in the service that you provide, you can absolutely find somebody that checks all of those boxes. But I'm curious about what it felt like for you coming into a pre-established team. I know for me, there was a lot of question in my mind. How is the team going to respond to you having primarily had me facilitating those consultation meetings, or the dashboards and going over their metrics and their numbers, and even feeling comfortable to come to you with case related issues or questions about things practice wide. And so it's been so nice to now be on this side of it and have had that happen really naturally
Mhm.
and gradually. But I'm curious what that part felt like for you, and then reflecting back kind of where that piece is now.
Sure. So I think any point coming into a new group of people, you know, you have your feelings, right? It's a little bit you're nervous. You're kind of like, oh, I hope everything goes well. I think so. I know this about me. I am a people person. There's really not anybody that I can't get along with, and so I know that about myself. However, when you're entering a new group, you don't want to be like the sun, right? You don't want to just be like, here I am. You know what I mean? You want to
I think
just,
I would be like that.
and that's okay, right? But so, it's about kind of, and I do the same really anywhere, and not just like professional settings, but like, when you're entering somewhere new, observe first, right? And see what the flow is, see what the dynamic is, and then see how you can kind of integrate yourself in. And that's how I've done it, right? Like really like low and slow. Regardless of all the times that I've been in leadership positions, I've never exploited that, right? Like I'm always about like I'm here with you. Like yes, when everything goes down, like yes, I'll take the fall. Like yes, I'll be the one to make the final decision, stuff like that, right? But it's never like a me versus you or stuff like that, right? Like we're all in this together. So, and when people, what I've learned along the way is that titles can intimidate people, and that someone, might get nervous around you because like you're the clinical director and it's like, oh, it's not that serious. Like to some degree, yes, like the position is important, but that's not my personality to be like, well, I'm the clinical director. This is how we should do things. And so, letting people learn that about me, that I'm pretty laid back. I come from a place of wanting to learn and understand versus like directing. So I think that part, it was a little bit slower. And then I think just the dynamic of here, right? Because like the office space and coming in and stuff like that. And just in general, like clinicians, like, we're not in an office like that, we're all working together, right? We're not in finance, right? We're working
Right?
with clients
In little
individually.
cubicles.
Yeah. So we don't always have the opportunity to see each other. But, for a little bit, I was in the conference room, doing like work and stuff. And that was really helpful because a lot of folks were coming in and out because the kitchen is right off to it. And I got the opportunity to meet a lot of clinicians here and, just chat. And I think that was really helpful. Yeah. Yeah. So I think now it feels comfortable. I'm
Mhm.
officially in my own space now, which feels great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just feels good.
Hmm. You brought up a lot of really good tips there. And I think a lot of what you're describing is just naturally who you are as a person that works really well in a role like this. But that was a great segue into my other question where you were talking about just professionalism and your approach and some of those approaches that tend to work well with most people.
Mhm.
And so I, being someone who has had enough interaction with you and gotten to know you, can really see a lot of that. And I think the challenging part is verbalizing that, like putting that into words. What is it that has made this so successful? And I think the other thing that I was considering was when you mentioned boundaries and how when you step into a leadership role, I would agree. I think it's emotional intelligence, what we're
Mm.
speaking about, where when you understand yourself and you've done some of your own work and exploration, you know some of maybe the pain points or triggers, for lack of a better term, that we have, maybe certain things that might cause a reaction within us. That we realize at a certain point, or hopefully we do, that it's our responsibility to manage that. And that as a leader, I have found the most effective strategy has been to do what I need to do to be able to show up in any given interaction and prioritize the person that I'm interacting with. So whatever is coming up for me, it's there, it's real, and I'm not ignoring it, but I'm putting it on hold so that I can be present for that person, manage whatever the situation is, support them in whatever they're feeling and going through, and then knowing the appropriate time and place to manage whatever I'm holding back. And I see you having the ability to do that so effectively. And I think part of it is what you were describing, staying calm in crisis. But I think it goes so much further than that. Is there anything that you could share that's been helpful to get you to that point where you're able to do that so successfully?
Um, I think
I
it's
learn a lot from you, Kelly.
oh, thank you. I think it's just been a lifelong journey for me. I've said for probably since my 20s. that my goal is to master myself, right? And in all ways, right? And I'm never in competition with anyone but me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. I've never felt like, well, I can't say I've never felt envy or anything like that, but if I do feel it, I clean it up, right? Because like, what's happening for me there? But I think I like being kind. I like being calm. Calm feels nice.
Yeah.
I like being a good person ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
and that has been since my existence, since
Yeah.
I've been brought into this world. Even as a little kid, that's just how I've always been.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, but with that, like, to fine tune it comes the work, right? So
Right.
obviously I've had my own experience in therapy and done some work there.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it really helpful. And I always say to
Yeah.
folks, like, if therapy's not your thing, that's okay, right? But find something, there's plenty of resources. There's books. You could go that route. You could go a yoga route, right? Anything, but
Mm-hmm.
find your way, right? Because it can't just be you're existing in this world. Like, you have to learn it and figure out how to navigate. And I
Yeah.
think that, you can't expect the world to change for you, right? So you have to be able to adapt in any situation that comes your way. And that can feel scary and maybe anxiety provoking, but as long as you can trust that you have the internal skill set to
Yeah.
manage anything that comes your way. And proof is you are here and alive and you've survived all of your stuff, right? So there's proof right there. Um, yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know if I answered that.
You did.
Okay.
I mean, I think in all reality, it is who you are, but there's obviously things that contributed to you being that way. And so, yeah, you spoke to that. I mean, a lot of it was just kind of like who you are and early experiences, but seeking out your own therapy and, I'm sure experiences in other jobs. Is
Sure.
it a requirement to have leadership experience before becoming a clinical director? No, but I would highly recommend it. Just
Sure.
like I would recommend that somebody work in a practice before they start their own.
Sure.
So is it essential? Is it mandatory? No, but I think you come in with hopefully some really good experience, exposure, and more knowledge about yourself that's going to help you to be more successful
Yeah.
in that position. So I guess another thing that I am thinking about is what you mentioned before about how a clinical director is somebody who can really help the practice owner. I'll take it one step further, really embrace that role of CEO. And I just completed the first cohort of a program on just this. So it's like how to master that CEO mindset, because it really is exactly that. It's a mindset. It's something that you have to consciously embrace, accept. And for me, I won't say that I resisted it, but I would say that it didn't come naturally and it was something I had to conscientiously do. And I wasn't able to give it that time and attention and focus that it really deserved until we had you. And it was a gradual progression, right? So I think the key, and this is for those listening that might be struggling to work on the business instead of just in the business, they're still really in the day-to-day operations as a practice owner. They're that first go-to or go-to for everything. And so I think if I were to bring it back to the beginning, the first piece that was really crucial was having somebody solid in an administrative role, somebody that was handling all of that back end, all of those tasks that have to do with client onboarding. And then from there, I feel like it was that promotion internally of somebody that had the skill set to be a really solid supervisor and could balance out that role of carrying a caseload, but also providing supervision. And so we
Sure.
have that in our clinical team lead. And then from there, I feel like we were ready for a clinical director. And I think for those of us that have started a business and grown a business, it can be tough to take a step back and to trust and to have faith that other individuals are going to be able to do that job well and serve the team well and the clients well. But I'm here to say it can be done. So anything that you would add to what contributes to success in a role like this? Anything that we could have done differently that might have made this more successful? Or for those that are listening that might be on the fence, what might help to encourage them that this is a good direction to go in? If a practice owner wants to embrace more of the CEO role, if a practice wants to expand more successfully, what would you say to them?
Um, well, I think, what you had said, how, at first, you kind of
Like you
not
started with the
delegating, but
administrative tasks and then built from
yeah,
there.
yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say for the person, for the clinical director,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like trust the process and
Yeah.
and don't personalize anything, right? And that should just go with everything in life. Trust the
Yeah.
process, don't personalize. Because like here I am on the other side, and I'm grateful that it happened that way, right? But I think knowing that, like I can really understand that this is your business. This is something that you've invested in, like everything in every single
Mm-hmm.
way, right? So if you were, a little bit slower to delegate, that's because like it's hard, right?
Yeah.
It's hard for you to kind of just let it go and be able to trust. And not that there's like a trust issue. It's just that this is something you've invested in, right? Like financially, physically, all the ways, right? So I think for me, it was just kind of sitting back and letting that happen for a minute. Like you
Mm.
had your process as much as I had mine. So I
Yeah.
think it's important to know that if somebody is new in the position, trust that this is a new position. You have never done this either.
Right.
So there has to be this process with it.
Can I add something in really quickly to
Of
that? Because
course.
I think that this is a good point to make that, yes, I think that's absolutely a component, and I can see how it felt that way. I also think for me, and you've gotten to know me well, I'm going to throw the Enneagram out there. So, with me being an Enneagram 1, so the perfectionist, with a 2 wing, the helper, I can be very others over self oriented.
Sure.
So, for me, I am primarily always considering the workload of everybody on my team, the stress level of everybody on my team. It really matters to me that they have a positive experience here, recognizing that I can only do so much. And so I honestly think that it was a balance between everything that you're describing, where yes, delegating is hard, it takes some trust, but I think it was also really doing everything that I could to ensure that I wasn't throwing too much at someone, definitely did not want to overload anybody, and wanted to make sure that everything felt manageable. So I think that that's a piece that's really important to me. And I think communication
Yeah.
is so key. And you being an Enneagram 8 and knowing that before you came in. So, having that challenger component, we were able to, again, co create, where I feel like we really approached each other with this mutual respect,
Mhm.
with this intention to really understand where the other person was coming from, check in, make sure that things were working. We were able to really work together around what the day to day was going to look like, not only the structure of kind of your week and how much of that was going to be clients and how much of that was going to be this other stuff. We could
Sure.
be really fluid and do what worked and felt appropriate and manageable and reasonable. So I think it's worked really well.
Yeah.
So I don't know, just a thought that I had that I feel like that was also a real driving force
Sure.
for me.
Well, and I have to say, you're literally the first person that I've ever worked for that says and does what they mean, right? And
Oh,
so, like, well, because it's not, I had communicated with you that there's certain clientele that I kind of want to just move away from, and
yes.
it was respected, right? Which happens, but it wasn't like a couple months down the line, like, you sure, like you can't put this in, and I know the reality of that's how it works, so
Right.
no shame to anybody, but at the same time, I really appreciated that. Like
Mm-hmm.
you did consider me in all the ways, right? You did consider my workload, how I was going to enter in this position. I think for a little while I was like, is this real? Like, is she for real? Because it was so genuine, and not that I haven't come across genuine people in this field,
Right.
obviously, but it was so refreshing
Mm-hmm.
to have this experience with you.
Yeah.
And I've already decided you'll be my last boss. Like I will never, I'll never work for another person again. If I do from here, it's just on my own. But you're my last person.
Wow, what a compliment.
Yeah. No, so it's just I couldn't even imagine a different setting after having this experience. Like it's too, yeah, it's too positive. Like I would never want to taint it.
Wow. All right. Well, let's end quick so that can be the last thing on people's minds. No, I can't say more about what a benefit this has been to our practice. Like we are better for having not only someone in this position, and I've said this to you before, but having it be you. You are somebody who considers the big picture. You keep a pulse of what's going on in the world. You are so intuitive of every single person that is a part of this practice. There's a genuine care and positive regard and respect. And so you came in with such an incredible skill set and just qualities that make you you that have been such a welcomed addition. And so I'm continually learning and growing. And I can't speak more if we're kind of bringing this full circle for who's listening, for anybody who might be on the fence. If you're in the position of practice owner and you're going to be expanding, it is invaluable to have another person that has a level of investment in the team that is more than an average employee, that can engage in those conversations with you when situations happen, because they do. In the time that you have worked here, we have had to terminate an employee. We have had to draft a performance improvement plan. We have had to deal with some challenging cases and develop some policies that we did not previously have, because we knew there was a possibility that those situations could happen. But because of how things played out, we really needed something in writing and solid and concrete. And so with all that being said, there are going to be nuances in any business, but in the mental health profession specifically. And it is so invaluable to have somebody that you can take a step back, that you can share your perspective, hear their perspective, also get your read on a certain situation, which has been so helpful for me, because we don't always see ourselves accurately.
Sure.
And then to be able to tackle whatever it is, but you're not alone. And I can say that practice ownership and group practice ownership can be extremely lonely. I actually posted about it today on the social media pages that I have for Compassionate Consulting Company, that it's one of those things that I wish I had known before stepping into this role, how invaluable it is to have people that get it, and to identify those appropriate people that aren't your clinicians necessarily, that you can go to for that kind of different level of issue. So thank you for the leap of faith to come on board. Thank you for contributing so positively to this team, and for just being the kind of person that you are, but also sharing your experience and some of the things that contributed to this being positive for those listening that might be in a similar position.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.